2.2, apply the principles of assessment and the rules of evidence that we looked at in week 3 in gathering quality evidence. So here's some fantastic resources from the QVDC, the Queensland Vet Development Centre, that we're going to be working with today. So here's a copy of their slide here on the principles of assessment. So we're needing to apply these principles when we're gathering the evidence, when we're planning what evidence, when we're discussing and determining and agreeing with our stakeholders what evidence it is we want to gather. So, will the evidence be valid? Will it be reliable? Will it be flexible, and will it be fair to the candidate and fair to all of the other candidates? So let's see what that actually means. We've discussed at length from week 1 right through to week 3 all of the concepts that would make any evidence valid. We know that we have to apply all of the components of a unit of competency when we're gathering evidence to make sure that they have the knowledge, the skill set, that we've worked through the performance criterion, that we've addressed the critical aspects. So we have thoroughly covered that. So we know that if we've done that, our evidence is going to be valid. We also know that we're going to benchmark it to industry standards, and we've talked a lot about that in week 3. We've briefly touched on AQF levels, the Australian Quality Framework. There was a document that you downloaded in week 1, and I've given you some extracts on that, and we will flesh that out shortly. This is where we're saying the styles of questioning at a AQF level 1, somebody that's fresh out of high school or new to a position, would be very different to the types of assessment and questioning and standards that we'd give a supervisor or manager, say round about a Certificate 4 level. So we'll flesh that out a little bit more. We'll also talk at length in week 4 about the dimensions of competency. And week 3 here, you can probably recognise the LLN as language literacy and numeracy. So long as we've addressed the language literacy and numeracy issues that might be required for that unit of competency, that our learners are capable of communicating with, you know, the right level that's required and set out in that training package, then, you know, it would be considered valid. For example, it would be very difficult to be able to say that a trainer and assessor is competent at a Certificate 4 level if they're illiterate. It would be quite interesting to see how any assessor, an RTO, is going to be able to show that there was enough available methods for that trainer and assessor to be capable of delivering and preparing and designing. Maybe it's not impossible, but these are the types of issues you would have to look at under validity. Reliability. You know, that this is where we're looking at the benchmarking. So within the instruments, that there is very clear benchmarks. So at Evoke, you looked at week 3, you got some assessor guidelines, which were the answer sheets to the questionnaire, and you saw that there was red text. And you've started to look at in week 3 whether that is reliable. You know, you now as an assessor, can you clearly understand what the benchmark is? Do those benchmarks need to be adjusted? You know, is there new responses from candidates that those current benchmarks hadn't catered for that truly would make that learner, you know, fully competent? So this is part of a validation process that we look at, and we're constantly improving and adjusting. So, you know, and this is where this advice to assist judgment, this benchmarking, so any of that red text was the advice to assist in the judgment of competency. You know, we trial the tools. We're constantly trialing the tools. So as we're improving them, we're retrialing them with the next set of candidates. We're making adjustments along the way. But, you know, all tools have been trialed previously as well. And of course here, this continual improvement process, we're reviewing them. So this is where we're getting the candidate's feedback, and, you know, and also through our trial groups, observing how they're managing with the instruments and making adjustments accordingly. And that will happen 10 years down the track, 20 years down the track. There will be no end to continual improvement. So we're also making sure then that our evidence is going to be flexible. We've done a lot of this in week 3 with reasonable adjustments. You know, is the text large enough for a sight-impaired person to read? Can the questions be given orally through direct questioning for someone who might have literacy issues or sight impairment issues? So how are we going to be flexible to make sure that our candidate has the best chance within their capabilities to provide us evidence of their competence? And this can be negotiated. We need to, we've talked about this reasonable adjustment here, and at the same time, as we're making these reasonable adjustments, is it going to be fair to the other candidates? So is there going to be the same level of stretch for, you know, we don't want the person with reasonable adjustments having any unfair advantage over the other learners. So if we have perhaps, say, a translator that's assisting John, we've got to make sure that that translator isn't prompting him. There's a difference between an enabling question from an assessor and, you know, the translator actually doing the task for John. So we have to make sure that it's genuinely John's work, and you'd have to build up a pretty good relationship with that translator and make sure that they understand the parameters. You know, that the information genuinely has to come from John. So that's how we would look at, you know, is it fair to the other candidates there? And essentially it's maintaining the integrity, isn't it? Because we want it to be John's genuine work.